I've always hated storms. Ever since I was a kid, the sound of wind howling through the trees and rain pounding against the windows set me on edge. Tonight, though, the storm was more than a background noise. It was a deadly hurricane barreling toward the city. I had no choice but to get out before it hit. It was 11:45 p.m., and the warnings on the radio were growing more frantic with every minute. The evacuation order had been issued hours ago, but Aldeed waited too long to leave, hoping it wouldn't come to this. Now the roads were nearly empty, save for the occasional set of headlights appearing into the darkness, swallowed by the rain. The wind howled like a living thing, pushing against my small sedan as I sped down the highway. I could barely see through the sheets of rain hammering down, and the wipers struggled to keep up. I was heading for my sister's house, 2 towns over, away from the flood zones, away from the worst of the storm. I had to make it. That's when I saw him. He was standing by the side of the road, soaked to the bone, waving his arms wildly in the rain. My stomach twisted. My mind screamed not to stop, to keep going, but something about the way he stood there, shivering in the downpour, made me hesitate. He looked desperate. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. He ran to the passenger side window and knocked, water streaming down his face. His eyes were wide with fear. "Please," he shouted over the sound of the storm. "I need to get out of the city. Can you give me a ride?" I hesitated, my heart racing. Every instinct told me to say no, to drive away. But the look on his face. It was hard to say no to someone in that kind of panic. Reluctantly, I unlocked the door, and he slid in, dripping water all over the seat. He let out a breath, shivering. "Thank you," he muttered, wiping rain from his face. "You have no idea." One didn't answer. Instead, I just focused on the road, forcing my hands to stay steady on the wheel. As we drove, the only sound between us was the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers and the relentless roar of rain. For the first few minutes, he was silent. But then the questions began. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his voice casual but low. "To my sister's," I replied, keeping my eyes straight ahead. "Are you alone?" He followed up quickly. Something about the way he asked that made my skin crawl. I nodded barely and felt his eyes shift toward me. I could sense him staring, even though I didn't dare look. The air in the car felt different, thick with tension, and I noticed him shifting closer, just slightly. With every minute that passed, my pulse quickened. "I'm glad you picked me up," he said softly, his voice creeping into my thoughts. "I hate being alone in storms." I swallowed hard, the unease growing in my chest. Something about the way he said "alone" sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't just talking about the storm. The rain battered the car harder, and the wind howled louder as we drove through the nearly deserted streets. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him glance toward my hands, gripping the steering wheel, then toward my phone lying in the console. "What about your family, Nori?" he asked. "Are they expecting you?" My grip tightened on the wheel. "Yeah," I lied, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "They're waiting for me." He didn't say anything for a while, just sat there, watching me. The silence between us was suffocating. Every nerve in my body was screaming that something was wrong. Then, up ahead, I saw it. A small, dimly lit building sitting on the corner of an intersection. A police station. Without thinking, I flicked my turn signal and slowed down. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "I need to stop for a moment," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "I forgot something important." He shifted in his seat, and I felt his body tense up. "We don't have time to stop," he muttered, his voice lower, more urgent now. I pulled into the station's lot, parking right by the front entrance. My heart pounded in my chest as I threw the car in park. "It'll just be a minute," I said, my hand already on the door handle. "Wait here." Without giving him a chance to respond, I got out, the rain hitting me like ice. I slammed the door behind me and bolted toward the station, my feet splashing through puddles. I didn't look back. As I reached the door, I heard the car engine rev, and through the rain, I caught a glimpse of my taillights disappearing into the storm. One stood there, soaked, shivering, and breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know who that man was or what he wanted, but deep down, I knew that if I hadn't stopped, if I hadn't made it to this station, I might not have made it out of that car alive. I live alone in a small, rented house in Sarasota, Florida. When the evacuation order for Hurricane Matthew came, I realized I had a problem. Every gas station in town was already out of fuel. I drove around all day looking, but there was nothing. With only a quarter tank left, I couldn't get far enough to escape the storm's path. So, I packed a small bag, locked up my house, and headed out on foot. The wind was already picking up as I stood on the main road, hoping to hitch a ride. For 2 hours, I watched car after car speed by, packed with families and people desperate to get out. I felt invisible, like nobody would ever stop. Then, finally, a dark blue SUV slowed down. The driver, a man in his 40s, rolled down the window and looked me over. His face was pale, his hair neatly combed back. "Need a lift?" he asked, voice calm but tense. I hesitated, glancing around. There were hardly any cars left now, and the wind was howling louder. "Yes, please," I said, climbing in. As soon as I shut the door, I heard the distinct CT ick of the locks engaging. I buckled my seatbelt, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that washed over me. "Thank you so much," I said, forcing a smile. "Just need to get out of the city." "No problem," he replied, eyes fixed on the road. But his gaze shifted to me every few seconds in the rearview mirror. "Where's your family?" "Why are you alone?" "Couldn't get a hold of them," I lied. "Just needed to get out quickly." He nodded slowly, his fingers tapping an odd rhythm on the steering wheel. "No boyfriend? No one to worry about you?" My heart skipped. No, just me." I tried to laugh it off, but his eyes stayed on me longer than necessary. The road stretched empty before us, rain slashing against the windshield. The tension in the car grew thicker. I glanced down and noticed something odd. The radio volume was set to 0, and yet the display showed it was playing a local emergency broadcast. He'd turned off the sound, and then I saw it. In the footwell of the back seat, partially hidden under a blanket duct tape and a coiled rope. My stomach flipped. I turned slowly to face the door, fingers brushing the handle. I pulled gently, it didn't budge. Locked. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, his voice almost gentle. "You look scared." My heart pounded, and I tried to think of something to say, anything. I think I left something behind." "Could we stop for a second?" He smiled a slow, unsettling grin. "We're not stopping until we're out of the storm, sweetheart." I lunged for the door lock, but he grabbed my wrist in a flash. His grip like a vice panic surged through me. I yanked back, trying to twist free, but he was strong, too strong. "Let me out!" I screamed, but the wind and rain drowned out my voice. He just laughed softly, his face inches from mine now. "Relax," he murmured, his fingers digging into my arm. "We're going to have a lot of time to get to know each other." Desperation gave me strength. I kicked hard at the dash, jerking my arm free. My elbow caught him in the chin, and he cursed, loosening his grip just enough for me to slam my fist onto the window button. It lowered a crack, and I shoved my fingers into the gap, pulling frantically. I could feel him lunging toward me. But before he could grab me again, I managed to wrench the door open and threw myself out onto the rain-slicked road. One hit the pavement hard, but scrambled up, running blindly into the storm. I didn't look back. I just ran, the wind and rain tearing at me, until I reached a small gas station down the road. By the time the police arrived, the SUV was gone. They never found him. But sometimes, when I think about that stormy night, I can still see his smile in the mirror, the smile of a man who thought he had found exactly what he was looking for.